Well, Jake Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts.
Today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
Federal investigators jumped into action, and they weren't messing around. We're talking about takedowns, serious FBI raids, intense allegations surfacing that the Paul brothers actually attempted to flee the country while this mountain of evidence kept piling up around massive fraud and rigged matches that apparently violated federal gambling laws. Just let that sink in for a second.
At any point, did you start to take your foot off the gas just a little bit because you knew he was tiring out?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a bit. You know, I wanted to give the fans a show, but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt.
Did you carry Mike?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Yeah, like there was a point where, you know, I was just like, okay, he's not really engaging back. And so I don't know if he's tired or whatever. And I could just tell, you know, his age was showing a little bit. And I just have so much respect for him. And that like violence war thing between us, like after he slapped me, I wanted to, you know, be aggressive and take him down and knock him out and all that stuff. But that kind of went away as the rounds went on.
What started as internet conspiracy theories, those whispered discussions floating around Reddit forums and explosive TikTok breakdowns that most people brushed off as online nonsense, had exploded into a real federal investigation with genuine criminal consequences. And right now, as more information keeps leaking and new intelligence emerges, one thing is crystal clear and absolutely undeniable: the Jake Paul era. This entire period of manufactured boxing spectacle and carefully selected opponents is totally over.
Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson was 100% scripted. Mike Tyson repeatedly bit his boxing gloves throughout the fight. When fights are scripted, fighters do weird gestures to signal that they're hurt. It's very possible Mike Tyson was biting on his glove to tell Jake Paul to calm down. Now, if that's not enough proof that this fight was scripted, in the middle of the fight, Mike Tyson is literally talking to Jake Paul while they are clinching.
Hold up though, because this whole situation didn't start with FBI raids and criminal allegations. Let's rewind to when people weren't talking about warrants and federal investigations and serious legal consequences. Let's go back to when the skepticism was just whispers in the background, just casual speculation. We're talking about online theories, everyday fans noticing strange moments in Paul's fights, wondering if something seemed off, if the whole thing didn't add up properly.
That's definitely a crazy fight because of the weight differences. The weight difference in there, I only know one man that'll do the weight difference like that, and that's the Bronze Bomber. You know, for me, in my opinion, I think it's scripted a little bit because, you know, of the weight difference, and, you know, Joshua's a former, you know, champion. And also, you know, he's current, he's active, you know. I mean, this is going to be the first time that we see Paul, you know, fighting an active fighter. You know, I mean, we seen the Mike Tyson, that was all fun, that was cute, you know what I'm saying? It's fun and games and stuff, but now you're dealing with a real professional, you know. And so
5 years ago, if you suggested Jake Paul's boxing matches were scripted, that they were predetermined outcomes designed for entertainment rather than genuine competition, you got called a conspiracy theorist and basically laughed out of the room. 6 months ago, you were part of a growing movement, part of this wave of people connecting dots and identifying patterns that couldn't be ignored anymore. Today, right now, you're completely vindicated, proven right in the most incredible way possible.
Discussion, any agreement about, hey, you need to get the fight into this round, you need to carry him for X amount of rounds, you need to do your part to get it into the 5th, 6th, or whatever.
Absolutely no way ever. I mean, if you look at a couple of the right hands that AJ missed with in the first couple of rounds, like, they would have done the same job on Jake's jaw if they would have landed. And Jake did very well to avoid them. So I always said going into the fight, AJ's not the kind of guy that's going to come out like a train, just start swinging away. He's going to take his time. And that's what he did. You know, the fight definitely went a few more rounds than anticipated from Anthony. But it's like, even now, it's like, yeah, it was definitely a fix. Some guy commented today on one of my posts, yeah, it was definitely a fix. I go, you do know that he's broken his jaw in 2 places.
The suspicion started small, almost innocent really. Fans noticed inconsistencies, tiny details that seemed suspicious, opponents who appeared too cooperative during fights, unusual referee decisions that made no tactical sense, late round behavior that looked rehearsed rather than spontaneous, but it remained questionable, always explainable with convenient reasons. Bad luck, former champions past their prime, internet drama manufactured for attention and engagement, but then that leaked Tyson fight script dropped and everything shifted completely.
So people think I do steroids and all this shit, so I have a plan, because I think it's fucking bizarre. That's like the only excuse they can come up with is like rigged fights, Jake Paul does steroids. So after boxing, I'm gonna do a cycle of steroids to show people what Jake Paul on steroids actually looks like, because I want to shut people the fuck up.
But here's where we get to Anthony Joshua, and this is where everything transforms, because we're not talking about some washed up fighter or another carefully chosen opponent. We're looking at a former two-time heavyweight champion with real achievements, an actual boxer with Olympic gold on his resume, with victories over Vladimir Klitschko, one of the greatest heavyweights in history, with a professional record that Jake Paul could never replicate, could never even pretend to have.
Never once in Jake Paul's career been any talk of that sort, of anything to do with the fight being anything but a real fight that has exactly the same situation as any professional fight. And that's exactly the same thing here for the Anthony Joshua fight. It's just beyond mind-blowing that people would think that. Anthony Joshua was on record saying that if he didn't finish him in the first round, that would be disappointing, that it would be a failure. The narrative changed as we got closer to fight night and obviously post-fight, and I understand why, but they were pretty adamant it would take max 2 rounds to knock out Jake Paul.
Joshua wasn't some faded competitor years removed from his prime, and he wasn't some MMA reject looking for quick cash. He represented legitimate talent, a true world-class boxer going up against a YouTube personality who'd been masquerading in boxing shorts. The betting lines told the story clearer than any breakdown could. We're looking at massive international interest, hundreds of millions wagered on the outcome across gambling sites worldwide, and that's exactly why the fixing allegations became a federal matter instead of just internet chatter. When serious money moves through betting, when licensed bookmakers and gamblers are risking real cash on a predetermined outcome, the spectacle enters federal crime territory, serious criminal ground. It becomes wire fraud. It becomes something the FBI actually pursues and has jurisdiction to charge. Eddie Hearn, Joshua's well-known promoter who's been working this business for decades, went into damage control mode immediately, and he had to because the accusations weren't fading like he probably hoped. They were growing, spreading, gaining momentum and credibility. He appeared in interview after interview, saying the same thing over and over, like some mantra he was hoping would become true. If this was fixed, we'd be facing FBI investigation, he kept claiming. Think about that defense for a minute, really analyze it. His argument wasn't that rigging a professional boxing match was impossible, or that the accusation was absurd on its face. His defense literally relied on the threat of federal investigation as proof of innocence, as if federal laws existing somehow meant nobody would dare break them. You think I'd ever let AJ go along with a script against Jake? Hearn kept saying, almost desperately, because Hearn is a seasoned promoter who has worked boxing at the highest levels, who understands exactly how this business operates, who knows that Joshua wasn't supposed to demolish Paul like that, wasn't supposed to embarrass him so completely. The deal, the alleged deal that people were whispering about, was supposed to have Joshua winning early, making it competitive, but with restrictions, with limitations, with contractual boundaries on how badly he could damage Paul's reputation and marketability. And then came the admission from Paul himself, the confession that no spin could fix. Right after the fight, bloodied and broken, his face swollen beyond recognition, Paul had to confront the reality he'd been avoiding. His jaw was destroyed, not just bruised from impact, not just swollen from a clean shot, but broken in multiple places, completely shattered, really. He needed emergency surgery, the kind of medical work you don't need from a fight that went according to plan. The damage was severe, potentially career-ending even, and right there, trapped in the ring with cameras rolling and no way to spin the narrative positively, Paul had to tell the truth for maybe the first time in his boxing career. "I got demolished," he mumbled, the words barely audible through his destroyed jaw, "but I'll come back and keep winning." He tried, attempting to salvage something from the wreckage, but there was nothing left to save. No narrative that could make this look like progress. The Joshua fight wasn't close, wasn't competitive, wasn't even entertaining from a sporting perspective. It was annihilation, a mismatch, a real boxer showing what happens when manufactured hype meets genuine skill. Joshua took virtually no damage, barely broke a sweat. Honestly, Paul absorbed everything, every punch, every ounce of punishment that comes from facing someone who actually belongs in there. And that contrast explains everything about what happened in Miami. After December, former professional boxers started breaking down what they'd witnessed, not just the Joshua beating alone, but Paul's entire boxing journey viewed as one complete story. Paulie Malajay, a former world champion who fought at boxing's highest level, who recognizes authentic competition, said what everyone was starting to realize. Jake Paul's opponents weren't randomly selected from available fighters. They were strategically chosen, carefully handpicked specifically, out-of-shape MMA veterans well past their peaks, fighters who hadn't competed seriously in years, people who needed the paycheck more than the victory. The moment he faced someone his own age, someone with comparable experience, fighting under standard testing protocols without special contractual protections, he couldn't compete, couldn't even survive really. That loss should have ended everything. The reality check that restored natural order, the moment when everyone acknowledged that Jake Paul wasn't a boxer, wasn't an athlete in the traditional sense. He was an entertainer pretending to be one, an influencer with excellent marketing skills and enough money to purchase false legitimacy. But instead of accepting defeat and moving on, instead of admitting the truth and returning to content creation, Paul pivoted to something different. He evolved, repositioned himself in boxing's ecosystem. He became more promoter than fighter, someone organizing events rather than competing in them, and he started putting together fights that weren't about competition or athletic excellence. They were about spectacle, about brand management, about controlling the narrative at all costs, and never letting reality interfere with the image he'd built. Then came the question that every combat sports athlete eventually faces, but most avoid entirely, and even fewer get investigated for. Was Jake Paul clean? Was his physical transformation from hard work and nutrition? Or was something else going on? The evidence pointed in a different direction toward a path that Paul definitely didn't want explored. During 6 months of preparation for the Tyson fight, Paul added 30 to 40 pounds of what appeared to be pure muscle, while maintaining, and here's what defies natural biology, he kept the speed and explosiveness he showed when he was 30 pounds lighter, maybe even improved it. His trainer Shane Mosley, a boxing legend who understands natural progression, said Paul gained 20 to 30 pounds during training camp. That's significant mass, serious size that should decrease speed while somehow maintaining the agility and quickness of a cruiserweight or someone much smaller and faster. That's not how human physiology works under natural training. That's not what clean preparation and diet produce regardless of genetic advantages. Then the Tommy Fury situation happened, which raised more red flags for observers. Tommy's father, John Fury, who's been around boxing forever and knows every angle, claimed Paul wouldn't agree to VADA drug testing. That's voluntary anti-doping agency testing with strict standards and oversight, with random tests and real consequences. Paul's response was typically evasive, dodging the actual issue. He claimed the Fury family was making excuses, seeking ways out of the fight, but he never addressed the testing concern directly. The optics were terrible, looked bad even to casual observers. If Paul was truly clean, if his system was clear, why would he resist stricter testing protocols? Why would he reject the monitoring that Olympic athletes accept routinely? Why would he choose weaker standards if he had nothing to hide from stronger ones? When the Joshua fight arrived, the conspiracy community was prepared, already organized and operational. Online groups dedicated to Jake Paul investigation, to analyzing his career and finding inconsistencies, had compiled evidence, cross-referenced footage from different fights, and built a case that seemed more credible with every new piece of information. Respected boxing analysts, people with credentials and reputations on the line were discussing it openly. Even casual fans who didn't spend hours on forums studying frame-by-frame replays were feeling something off. Something seemed artificial. The Tyson script leak didn't create this from nowhere. It crystallized it, gave it structure and specifics. It let people say what they'd been thinking privately, what they'd been reluctant to voice because it sounded too conspiratorial, too crazy to believe. and when Joshua destroyed Paul so decisively, so completely and convincingly, that theory became reality in countless minds immediately, because here was a fighter who wasn't playing along, who wasn't following whatever agreement might have been in place. Here was a professional who treated the fight seriously, who brought his full skill and power and demolished everything Paul had built, exposed it as the fake show it had always been. Jake Paul's response to the mounting evidence and public skepticism was textbook legal strategy straight from crisis management playbooks. He hired celebrity attorney Alex Spiro, someone who represents high-profile clients and understands how to weaponize courts for image protection. He had Most Valuable Promotions, his company, send cease and desist letters to anyone claiming his fights were staged or predetermined, trying to silence critics through intimidation, classic strong-arm tactics. His business partner and MVP co-founder appeared on the Ariel Helwani show to defend their enterprise and made statements that actually reinforced the critics' arguments if you listen carefully. When people openly claim that Jake is putting on fake or fixed fights, that's defamation, Nikisa Bitterian explained, treating legitimate questions like personal attacks. That's causing serious damage to his business, his reputation, his earning potential. He continued, clarifying their position, but while doing so revealed how paranoid they'd become. The truth is, plenty of questionable things happen in boxing. Everyone knows this, but we have never tried anything like that once since MVP launched and Jake Paul's career started. He insisted, we've never even discussed anything like that, never even entertained the possibility. Frank Warren, Joshua's co-promoter, took a completely different approach, one that was almost worse in its honesty. He didn't challenge the scripting allegations directly, didn't deny or confirm anything. Instead, he minimized the spectacle, dismissed Paul's previous fights as meaningless. Fighting a 60-year-old Mike Tyson is totally different from fighting Anthony Joshua, Warren stated, saying what everyone understood. Translation, reading between the lines, we all knew what we were dealing with here. We all understood Paul isn't a legitimate boxer in any meaningful sense, isn't someone who belongs in a ring with elite talent, but the money was too big to refuse. The payday was too enormous to let ethics get in the way. Within 2 weeks of the Joshua demolition, of Paul getting exposed on the biggest stage, federal agents raided Jake Paul's Calabasas mansion in what appeared to be a major investigation. Multiple news sources confirmed the search warrants being executed, verified the information independently. Aerial footage showed agents entering the gated community, government vehicles and federal teams surrounding the property. Logan Paul, Jake's brother and business partner, who's been involved in every aspect of this operation, apparently panicked completely, lost his mind even. Witnesses reported the official statement from the FBI was deliberately vague, almost mysteriously brief. Criminal activity related to an incident he's known for being publicly associated with, they announced, which reveals almost nothing while confirming something significant was unfolding. But the timing was obvious and impossible to ignore. The raid occurred as rumors circulated on social media, rumors that went viral and spread like wildfire, rumors that Jake and Logan Paul had been arrested while attempting to leave the United States, while trying to escape overseas before federal charges could be filed. Because after years of suspicion, after mountains of circumstantial evidence, after the leaked script that proved at least one fight was predetermined, after the Joshua demolition that exposed the entire con, after the pattern of hand-picked opponents and steroid allegations that never fully went away, the public was ready to believe that something major was happening, that the whole fraudulent empire was finally collapsing, that justice was finally catching up to the biggest scam in modern boxing history.